Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Moran, the author of the superhero novel Believers, and we're going to be reading chapter 8 today. Kind of a slow chapter, but yeah, some interesting stuff. Very family oriented. Anyway, I hope you all like it. I'll share the screen so you can see what I'm doing. Here we go. Boom. All right, and here we are. Chapter 8 Fishing. Knock, knock, knock. Time to wake up. Rise and shine, Jerry, Mr. Miller exclaimed. Huh? Dad, what time is it? Sunrise. Perfect time for fishing. Really? What does this have to do with my training? Jerry asked. Everything. Get dressed. I've already got the boat ready. Jerry rolled out of bed slowly, wondering why he was awake so early. He dragged himself into the bathroom, washed his face, and returned to his bedroom to get dressed. After putting on sandals and his favorite billabong shirt and bathing suit, he rushed to the kitchen, grabbed a Pop Tart, and hurried outside. His father was waiting in his white truck, which connected to a boat trailer with an open fisherman boat sitting on it. The boat was 22 feet long, with a center console, blue canopy, and a single outboard engine. They were going saltwater fishing, and Mr. Miller had a plan involving Jerry and his powers. They drove into the local boat marina, backed the trailer down to the water, and the boat gently slid into the water. Mr. Miller parked his truck and trailer, walked over to the boat, and jumped in. He began his usual routine of checking the engine and starting the ignition with the key. He had trouble at first, but after a few tries, the engine roared to life. They soon left the marina and went cruising on the open waters, which were flat and clear as glass. Everything was calm and still. There wasn't even a morning breeze. It was simply too early, as if nature had not yet woken up. The only audible sound was the engine, fighting to propel their boat across the bay. The fishing site was far away, so in order to pass time, Mr. Miller began telling a story. Once upon a time, sailors went out to sea in search of treasure. Along the way, they accidentally came upon beautiful women who could sing and enchant men to do anything they wanted. These women were known as sirens, and their powers may have been similar to yours. What if the same power could work on fish? Jerry started laughing and said, You want me to use my powers to help you catch fish? Sure, why not? Mr. Miller asked casually. That's silly, Dad, and lazy on your part. You did say you could do anything. Show me how it's done, Mr. Miller excitedly replied, hoping to see his son's wondrous powers and catch plenty of fish. After their conversation, Jerry walked to the front of the boat and sat on a cushion until they arrived at their fishing spot. He eventually became bored and tried meditating to take his mind off the long boat ride. Unknowingly, he started levitating. His body was floating in midair, just inches off the cushion. Jerry felt comfortable and peaceful. He had no idea he was levitating until he looked down. Then he freaked out, quickly grabbed the nearby metal railing, and yelled, Woo! Woo! Mr. Miller was busy driving and heard Jerry yelling, but he thought he was just having fun and did not think twice about it. He had no clue about what his son was capable of yet. Jerry did not understand how this adventure could help his training until the boat stopped dead in the water and his father said, Darn it, the engine conked out. He started searching the boat for tools and getting ready to open up the engine. Jerry curiously approached the engine and placed his hand on it. He felt intense heat and started cooling the engine with cold energy. Then he said, Dad, the engine is overheated. Mr. Miller turned around and saw Jerry's hand glowing with blue light. Mr. Miller scratched his head and said, "How did you—" "Never mind. That means something is clogging up the engine. Check the intake pump." "Got it," Jerry acknowledged, using his mind to probe inside the engine and intake pump. He quickly found a clump of seaweed and made the engine fire it out like a rocket. "Try it now," Jerry called out. Mr. Miller turned the key, and the engine started up like it was brand new. He patted his son on the back and asked, "How did you do that blue light trick and cool the engine with your hands?" "I just thought about snow and ice, and it was easy." "But how does it work?" Mr. Miller persisted. "If I believe it exists or can be done, then it happens. All those snow skiing vacations we went on in the past helped me do it. When I see the memories and remember the feeling of snow, I can channel cold energy," Jerry explained. "That's pretty cool, son," Mr. Miller said with a comical voice. "Are you trying to be funny, Dad?" Mr. Miller laughed and replied, "Yeah, I'm trying to break the ice." "I'm glad you're having fun," Jerry responded, "but I'm here to train my powers." "Oh, Jerry, your serious attitude is giving me the chills." "I'm dying here," Mr. Miller exclaimed as he cackled for almost a minute. However, he could see that his son was growing weary of the jokes, so he said, "Anyway, let's find fish and bring home a good dinner. We'll keep them on ice so they don't go bad." I couldn't resist. "Sorry, son. I promised to chill for the rest of the day." Mr. Miller chuckled at his last cold pun, and Jerry smiled as they continued driving toward their fishing spot. They soon reached their destination, and Mr. Miller said, "All right, son, time to try out the old fish finder." "Wait up, Dad. I have a better idea." Jerry sat down calmly on the side of the boat and started meditating. He thought about the story with the sailors and beautiful women singing. Then he touched the water with his hand and probed it with his mind, looking for fish like a radar system. He could feel the energy auras of numerous creatures in the water. He sent out feelings of peace and happiness to welcome all creatures in the area. He also created a song and started singing. "Oh, fish, I call to thee, come to me for a treat. We promise not to hurt or touch. We only want to play and watch." Mr. Miller thought his son was crazy. Nonetheless, he eagerly began preparing his fishing gear. Holding a brand new fishing rod, he was about to cast out his line when Jerry said, "Don't do it. I made a promise to the sea. Don't put anything in the water." With a dumbfounded look on his face, Mr. Miller asked, "But how are we supposed to catch fish if we—" "What in the—" One, two, 5, 10, and then dozens of fish started rising to the surface. Schools of dolphin, grouper, snapper, kingfish, and other fish all swam up calmly. They were now surrounding the boat and looking at Mr. Miller. It was as if they were waiting for him to do something. He slowly reached for a net, and Jerry said, "No, Dad, I promised them free food." "Are you kidding me? They're fish. We're supposed to eat them. Look at them all. They're practically begging us to catch them," Mr. Miller exclaimed. "Dad, I know you're excited, but we're here to practice using my powers, right? Get a camera out and plenty of bait. You're about to see a show." Mr. Miller reached into a bucket of chum, grabbed a handful, and reluctantly began throwing bait into the water. The fish started an eating frenzy, and Mr. Miller still did not understand why he was feeding fish instead of catching them. Jerry whistled, threw a few pieces of bait into the air, and the fish started doing tricks. They were swimming in circles, jumping around, doing flips and twirls, and snatching the bait in midair. Jerry was directing them, like a trainer in an aquarium. Dad, throw a few pieces above your head, Jerry suggested excitedly. Mr. Miller did so, and fish started flying overhead. Mr. Miller ducked a few times, trying to avoid the frantic fish, and one of them slapped him on the face with its tail. He continued ducking and evading flying fish, almost like a dodgeball game. He was laughing, cheering, and having a blast. All was well until a gargantuan creature suddenly jumped out of the water. As it soared in the air, Jerry looked up and screamed, "Whale!" Mr. Miller's eyes widened greatly, and he exclaimed, "No way!" Everything appeared to be happening in slow motion. Both Jerry and Mr. Miller marveled at the whale, watching its great underbelly rising above their heads and feeling a light spray of water. After its great leap, however, the whale came plummeting down onto the ocean's surface. A colossal wave crashed over the boat, and they nearly capsized. Thankfully, Jerry used his powers to create a blue force field around the boat just in time. However, the wave did push their boat away from the whale. After that, Mr. Miller said, "Okay, we're getting out of here pronto." "Wait, Dad, it's not here to kill us. Just relax." Jerry closed his eyes, raised his hands slowly, and concentrated on the whale. It was the size of a house and inching its way toward the boat. Mr. Miller was dying on the inside, trying tremendously hard not to panic. He thought that he was going to have another heart attack. The creature eventually made contact with Jerry's hand. Mr. Miller nervously took out his camera and captured as many pictures as he could. Once he ran out of film, he put the camera away and asked, "What now?" "Come over here, Dad. Don't worry, he won't bite." Mr. Miller's mind was blown. How could this be possible? He witnessed his own son using superpowers to fix an overheated engine, summon and play with schools of fish, and tame a massive whale. Was he dreaming? He pinched himself in the arm to make sure he was awake, and then walked over to his son and hesitantly touched the whale. The whale remained perfectly still, trusting Mr. Miller to do as he wished. Mr. Miller felt surprisingly calm, even though he was standing in front of a gigantic creature that could easily roll over and kill him. This feeling of comfort was a direct result of Jerry's power. When Mr. Miller was next to his son, he could feel Jerry's soothing energy, the same energy that affected the whale. With greater understanding and respect for his son, Mr. Miller said, "Thank you." They soon said goodbye to the whale and drove back to the boat marina. They talked the whole time, recounting everything that happened that day. Jerry and his father had never felt so close before. It was certainly be a day they wouldn't forget anytime soon. When they arrived back home, Mrs. Miller met them outside in the backyard and helped unload supplies. They both seemed incredibly enthusiastic, yet she did not see any fish in the boat and became curious enough to ask questions. "Did you guys have fun?" "Yes," they both answered. "Did you catch anything?" "No," they both replied. Mrs. Miller was confused. She could not understand why they were so excited. Her husband loved fishing, but whenever he went fishing and did not catch anything, it always put him in a bad mood. She approached him for further inquiry. "Honey, if you didn't catch fish, then what did you all do out there?" Mr. Miller and his son looked at each other. They laughed, and walked inside the house. Now, she thought they were playing a joke on her. She became frustrated, walked inside the house, and stopped her husband in his tracks. Before she had a chance to speak, Mr. Miller cut her off and said, "Wait until you see the pictures. They're worth 1,000 words." It turned out that the pictures were worth thousands of dollars, too. Mrs. Miller had connections to magazine companies, thanks to her writing job. She decided to develop all the pictures and send them to a popular fishing magazine. The magazine producers were drooling, awestruck by the well-tamed fish and enormous whale. They had never seen anything like it before, particularly from amateur photographers. The fishing magazine published her pictures, along with an article Mrs. Miller wrote. As a result, the Millers received a generous check, all without catching a single fish. And that's it. Chapter 8's done. Hopefully the next video will be chapter 9. I hope you all enjoyed it and had a good time. Thank you all very much, and have a good evening.